Section 2.4 is on applications of sets. So we've learned our sets, subsets, intersections of sets, unions of sets, complements of sets. We've been able to see all of these. We saw a nice application of Venn diagrams in the end with the blood types at the end of section 2.3. But let's see, why would we cover sets and why would we care about this? Well, sets, and particularly Venn diagrams, and understanding the different regions of the sets can have really, really good visual and interpretations of different types of problems. For instance, we'll look at a lot of survey problems, and we can use the Venn diagrams to represent these survey problems very, very well. Okay? So here's what I do is when I teach this in class, I read the first problem and I just let the students go to work. So I encourage you to do the same, and I'm going to show you exactly what I see when I do that. So it says example 1. A movie company is making plans for future movies and it wishes to produce. The company has done a random survey of 1,000 people. The results of the survey are shown below. 695 people like action adventures, 340 people like comedies, 180 people like both action adventures and comedies. So it says draw a Venn diagram to record the results of the survey. Be sure to label each region. So let's think about this. We need to label these. So I'm going to label these sets, but I want to make sure it makes sense to the name. So I am going to use an A, and that's going to stand for action adventures. And then I'm also going to use a C, which is going to stand for comedy. And if it's clear to the reader which one would stand for which, A, action, C, comedy, that's great. But imagine if one of them was action and a separate one was adventure. What if those were two different ones? One would start with an A, the second one would start with an A. It wouldn't be clear, so we would just title the circle by actually writing the name. So here we can use letters. On another example that we're going to see, two of them start with the same letter, so you're actually going to have to write the word instead, okay? And I want to go back and I want to think about my regions here. Regions 1, 2, 3, and regions 4. And so what I do is I give my students free rein and I say, go for it, try to do it. And here's what I see. I see them read the first sentence and they say 695 like action adventure. So they jump real quick and they put a, let me come up here and use a different color. They just put 695 right there because they read that sentence. And then they read the next one. It says 340 people like comedies, and so they just put a 340 over in the comedies, and then 180 like both. So simple enough, it seems like 180 like both. And so this is what they do, and I look at that and then I ask them, okay, well, what about region 4? What do you put in region 4? And this is where I get them to start thinking, well, how many total people are there? There's 1,000 total people, right? And let's think of how many people we've already done. We've already done 695 plus the 180 from the middle, plus we've done 340, and when I put that into my calculator, that's already 1,215 people. Well, there's only 1,000 people that were surveyed, so how is that possible? And the answer is, you've done it wrong. What have you done wrong? What you need to remind yourself of is you need to think of, what is region A? Region A, what does circle A represent? Which regions? Circle A represents 1 and 2. So when I take 1 and 2 together, that's when I need to get 695 people. Okay? Let's think about region 3, which is region C, right? Region C would be regions 1 and 3. And when I add those together, I need to get my 340. The only region that we are given for sure is the region that like both. The region that like both is region 1, and that's given to us as 180 people. So the 180 people that we put in the middle is correct, but I'm telling you the 695 and the 340 is not correct. And let's see why here. If the total for regions 1 and 2 need to be 695, then I need to find out what number goes right here in region 2 that I add to 180 and I get 695. So how would I figure that out? Well, to figure out region 2, what I would do is I would take 695, which is the total, but I'd subtract off the ones that I already placed in the circle, which is the 180. So let me, just to make sure, I'm going to go ahead and erase that 695. I'm going to erase that 340 now. I'm going to say that again. So I know 695 has to be the total of the two regions 1 and 2. I need to know how many go in just region 2. Well, what I do is I take the 695 for both circles and I subtract off the 180 that I already figured. So I do 695 minus 180, and when I do that, I'm getting 515. 515 would be the number of people that go in region 2. Okay? So I want to continue. I want to think about, what do I put in region 3? Well, I know that regions 1 and 3 added together need to be 340. Regions 1 and 3 added together need to be 340. So how do I find region 3? Well, to find region 3, I'm going to take the total number, which would be 340, minus the 180 I already placed in region 1. And if I do 340 minus 180, that gives me 160. So if I go to region 3 in my picture, I know that I have 160 people. Now what I want you to do is look at region 4. Again, I know the total must be 1,000. So if the total is 1,000, then what I want to do is take off the sum of all the rest of them. So add the regions 1, which was 180, plus region 2, which was 515, plus region 3, which was 160. Add those together and then subtract that from 1,000. I'm ending up with 145 people. So the remainder is 145 people. So how do you fill in the Venn diagram? What you need to realize is it is not just directly putting that number there. When you see that 695, that's not what goes in region 2. That's the sum of two regions. When you see 340, that is not region 3. That is the sum of two regions. So you have to look at this and do a little more work to get it. But now that we have that, we can analyze and think about, what do these regions mean a lot easier. For instance, if I said, what does region 1 mean? That would be people who like action and comedy. If I said region 2, that would be people that like action but not comedy. If I said region 3, that would be those that do like comedy and not action. And then if I talked about region 4, that would be people who like neither action nor comedy. I could do things like say, how many people do not like action? Remember A complement here? Well, isn't A complement regions 3 and 4? So how many people do not like action would be the sum of regions 3 and 4, 160 plus 145. So I could ask you a whole bunch of questions around this, but as long as you understand what each one of those regions mean, what intersections are, what unions are, and what complements are, you'd be good to go here. So again, if I said something like action or comedy, well, or is the union. So that would be regions 1 plus 2 plus 3. What if I said not comedy? Not comedy would be regions 2 and 4, and you would just add them together. So the key is, first step, fill out that Venn diagram, and then think and be able to answer the questions they ask. So let's look at these. How many of those surveyed like action adventures but not comedy? Action adventures but not comedy. Well, that's region 2. And we know what region 2 is. Region 2 is 515 people. So that's the answer to the question. Okay. How many of those surveyed like comedies but not action adventure? Comedies but not action adventure, we already said, is represented by region 3. Well, region 3 is 160 different people. How many of those surveyed do not like either of these types of movies? So do not like either of these types of movies. That's not action and not comedy. We're talking about region 4 here. Well, we've already done the math for that. The answer is 145. So what's really cool here is by labeling the regions and showing our math for the regions on the side, we've already showed our math for every single one of these problems. So the work for the problem is merely just saying which region you had to look at. Really nice and makes it easier for us.